Are your business's cash flows on a constant roller coaster ride? It might be because you suffer from what I call business multiple personality disorder. I'm going to explain what that is and tell you what you can do about it right now. Business multiple personality disorder is a funny term that I came up with to describe a trend, a paradigm that I've observed from the thousands of business owners that I've worked with over the last almost 20 years. And it looks like this. A business owner reads a book, listens to a podcast, goes to a mastermind, and now all of a sudden they're adopting the principles, philosophies, and even the demeanor of the person who wrote that book or who was that guest on the podcast. And what happens is it creates this really, really vicious cycle with their cash flow because they're constantly changing their approach to business. It would be like playing basketball, and every other game you change your shooting form, you change the way you're playing defense, you're writing new plays, and then you're wondering, why aren't we on the same page? Why do we keep losing? It's because you keep changing your approach. And then you can't really measure what works and what doesn't because you've had too many different adaptations to the way that you run your business. One week you were Gary Vee, next week you're Dave Ramsey, another week you're 10Xing everything. Now you're trying to be like Elon Musk. Too many different personalities that you're putting on. And the reality is that it's an incredibly fragile approach because you're playing somebody else's game. You're not leaning into your authentic self. So let's talk about what we can do differently. One, stop it. I remember hearing this anecdote about Seth Godin. He was on the, I think, Tim Ferriss podcast. And he was talking about how he kept getting this sound. I think whenever he touched his eye or rubbed his nose, and he went into the doctors and he said, "Hey, I keep getting this sound. Is there something wrong? What can I do about it?" And the doctor says, "Stop it. Stop doing it. If you stop putting your finger there, you'll stop making that sound." So oftentimes in business, the simplest solution is stop doing that. Stop putting on all these different personas and trying to be someone that you're not. And what you need to really understand is what I call the 3 rhythms of your business. Now, this is something I learned years ago when I was working at a firm called Deloitte. My main client was Microsoft. They used to talk about the rhythm of their business and how it followed these cycles around whenever they were launching a new version of Windows. And I thought about that, and as I started working with small business owners, I thought about the context of the rhythms of a small business, and it's really broken into 3 rhythms. First rhythm is the industry. The industry that you're in has a very specific rhythm. Take being a CPA, for example. Our firm follows the rhythm of the industry. There are tax deadlines. We can't change those tax deadlines. So I can't really fight against an industry rhythm, at least not in the short term, unless I want to inject a lot of volatility in my business. That is what a lot of accountants do, is that they ramp up their marketing activities after tax season, probably because they want more clients, but also many times what I hear from them is that they want a different business. They're so exhausted from tax seasons. Now they're ramping up their marketing, they're implementing a bunch of new systems during the lowest buying cycle for accounting and tax services. So they're spending more when they have the least amount of revenue and opportunities coming in. They're fighting against the industry rhythm. That's creating cash flow volatility. What's a better approach? Don't fight against those industry rhythms. If you own a gym, for example, you know that January is going to be your busiest month. People are coming in with New Year's resolutions, or you're on other health business. People have their New Year's resolutions. And so you're going to have potentially a peak month in January and maybe a little bit into February. And perhaps it's also really busy at the end of the year when people are coming in, ramping up their New Year's resolutions or trying to pay the rest of their deductibles. So if we collect a bunch of money in January or December, and that's all prepayments for the year, we better be really careful about how we spend that. And it may not necessarily mean that our business has grown. We have to compare it against last January or last December. So those are the industry rhythms. We need to understand those in terms of our revenue cycles, the buying patterns of our clients, and not fight against the industry rhythm because we can't change those. One way that you can identify if you've been fighting against industry rhythms is run your profit and loss by month. So this is something you can do in QuickBooks. Look at it over as many years as you can. So maybe as long as the business has existed, or at least a 5-year period, and look at the months where you've had a loss. Are they the same months every year? And does that coincide with the rhythms of your industry? So again, you may be incurring expenses or investing in periods where those happen to be the slowest months. So industry rhythms, we can't change them. Don't fight against them. Second rhythm of your business. This is based off specific decisions that you've made. Maybe you've decided to collect payments with credit cards, and consequently you have a bunch of chargeback risks. And maybe sometimes your Stripe account gets closed. Well, that's a business decision to use Stripe, collect credit cards. You could consider moving to ACH. You could consider moving to another platform or multiple platforms. But you've introduced a certain amount of risk and volatility to your business based off the decisions that you've made. So we want to look at each individual component of our business, operations, but getting very granular within operations, within marketing, within fulfillment, all of those things, and look at the specific business decisions that we've made and how is that impacting the financial performance of our business. Those are things that you can adjust, but we need to be very cognizant of the secondary and tertiary ramifications of making a change, because sometimes we solve one problem and it creates 2 or 3 additional problems. Or maybe we just simply solved a problem because we needed a problem to solve, which feeds into the last rhythm, which is the personal rhythms. Throughout the year, sometimes we're higher, sometimes we're lower in terms of our energy levels, our mindset, and we need to be aware of that because sometimes we're more likely to create a problem so we have something to solve. For myself personally, I find myself with the lowest amount of energy in January. And historically, in January and then also in May, I've wanted to make big sweeping changes, considered starting new businesses, closing businesses, because it has to do with my own personal level of energy. So I've had to implement a rule for myself, which is I'm not allowed to make any new changes in January or May. Also, anytime that I'm feeling down, I'm having a lack of clarity, I put that in my calendar. I mark it down. This specific day, June 14th, 2024, I'm feeling down. I write that down because the next time I'm feeling low, I look back in my calendar and I go, do I always feel kind of low or off this time of year? And I've shared this with clients and I write this down, note this, because this just may be a rhythm. It could be environmental. Like maybe all the pollen in the air is reducing your energy levels and consequently, you're feeling clouded in your judgment. And so by writing that down, we can go back and compare and see, okay, no, this is actually a trend. This is a personal rhythm for me. And so I'm not going to make any new decisions because I might change something that has a secondary or tertiary ramification. So make sure you're aware whether or not you are suffering from business multiple personality disorder, where you're constantly putting on some mask of somebody else's approach or philosophy, and work through those industry rhythms, understand those. Don't fight against the industry rhythm. Know your business decision rhythms. Those are things that you can change, but we got to make sure we understand our personal rhythms because maybe we're just looking to change something because we want to change something.